Welcome to the Everyday Citizens Tactical Podcast, Episode 42, Evolution of Warfare. My name is Jeremy and I will be your host. I am joined by Tyler Jackson, a U.S. Army veteran, one Shepard Cadre, and part of the Light Fighter Studies Group. In this episode, we discuss the evolution of warfare, lessons learned from the current conflicts around the world, and how it affects the American Rifleman concept.
Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours. Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. And Tyler, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeremy.
Yeah, for everybody that doesn't know who Tyler Jackson is, this is the guy I was talking about in my Winter Forge review video on YouTube who was hyping up the Road to War. This is that Tyler Jackson. So I'm glad to have you on. You're a very enthusiastic character.
Thanks for having me. I do appreciate it.
So for those that don't know, because I think the kind of the One Shepard Light Fighter Studies Group side of the, what one may consider the training realm is a little bit, the exposure is a little bit limited, which I know is something you guys are trying to do more of, is branch out and get more exposure and whatnot. So for those that aren't familiar with what you guys do, who is Tyler Jackson and, what is LFG?
Yeah. So a little bit about my background. I got my start in One Shepard. This was in high school. And at the time, it was we likened it to kind of like a JROTC or an ROTC preparatory school, right? And so it was still the same core curriculum. It's 2 semesters a year, one in the fall, one in the spring. And it was a progression of, basic infantryman skills, moving into situational training exercises. And we covered every offensive, defensive, and enabling operation in 3-90. So, you're going to get your deliberate attacks, your movement to contacts, you're going to get your enabling operations, your, zone reconnaissance, your point and area point and route reconnaissance. You're going to get your counter reconnaissance operations like screening patrols, raids, ambushes, you name it, covering the curriculum of light infantry doctrine. And then you go into a 24, 48-hour FTX. At the time, it was a 48-hour FTX. Now they've expanded it, and so it's a full 3-day FTX. But it was the same curriculum. And for us guys who were either going into ROTC or getting ready to go into active duty or National Guard or reserves, this was like our preparatory school. And so at the time, most of us younger guys, we're all high school, college age. And a handful of working adults, but it was mostly guys who were on glide path to go into the service, and we just had phenomenal instructors. These guys were Cold War vets, multiple tours around the world, ranging from Panama, Grenada to Korean DMZ Peninsula to Desert Storm, Bosnia, Kosovo. These guys just saw the gamut of the Cold War. And they brought that experience with us. And you have to think about the backdrop at that time. This was, 2005 to 2008-9 time period. So it was middle of GWAT, right after the surge. And so the focus was on counterinsurgency for the United States military. And specifically the TTPs were just frankly different than what we were, what the guys were taught in the Cold War. And so it was like this, this strange little enclave of keeping fieldcraft alive, really, infantry patrolling and fieldcraft. And so we just got so lucky with that program, and then it expanded. And as it expanded, a lot of us guys were either graduating from college or graduating high school, and most of us were either getting commissions or straight off to the School of Infantry. And so that's what I did. I joined active duty 2013. Went to the School of the Infantry in Fort Benning, and then immediately went to airborne school, got airborne qualified, and then I was super lucky. I got assigned to the 173rd in Italy. And so, I get over there to Italy. These guys had just come back off of a rotation from Afghanistan. And so all of our senior NCOs in the company, I was in battle company, second to the 503rd. All these guys were guys that, either directly deployed in the middle of GWAT, 07, 08 timeframe, during, if any of your listeners have seen Restrepo, that was Battle Company. And specifically with 2nd Battalion was in the Korengal Valley. And then, if you look in some of the famous battles, you've got the Battle of Wanat, Battle of Ranch House. And then specifically, we start getting some Medal of Honor recipients during that time period, during the first one being Staff Sergeant Sal Junta at Operation Rock Avalanche. And so these guys, they were either still in the company or in the battalion, or had just gotten out, but trained all the guys that were training us. And so I got another environment that was focused on aggressive patrolling and standards. And then also got great opportunities to go do foreign instruction. And so we were constantly rotating around the Baltics, Ukraine, and it gave us a chance not only to train with those allied or partner nations, but it also gave us an opportunity to learn some of their TTPs. And so it just a really, really good experience for a young NCO to constantly be deployed forward, and doing presence patrols near Russia, doing airborne operations, and then getting foreign instruction time. That was the first time I ever taught somebody that didn't speak English tactics, and so prior to that, One Shepard, once you go through the whole program, we can talk more about the program. But once you go through the whole program, one of the things that you can do if you're invited in is do their instructor program. So it's like an additional program on top of the tactics and leadership. And it's a 1.5 years, almost 2-year commitment. And you get assistant instructor time, and then eventually become a primary instructor. And so you get a chance to teach the program that you just went through. And so it gave me platform time to get up, pitch a class, give students feedback, design learning activities and exercises that are going to engage them in that task or skill, and then assess and figure out was what we trained effective. I think that's a tough thing to learn, and so it was kind of an incubator, and it still is. And so if any of your listeners are interested, why would I go to One Shepard? Well, not just for the tactics, not just for the leadership, but if you ever want a chance to teach, and specifically teach, small unit tactics, they'll get you there. They'll put you through the pipeline, and you can become an instructor. It's not a crazy requirement. And so, after the Army, I went into the reserves. I had a great opportunity to go to a training support battalion, and at the training support battalions, what we did in the reserves is, on the 2 weekends a year, every reserve unit in the Army goes to the field and they get evaluated. And part of this evaluation is on what we call mission essential tasks. And that's kind of the overarching framework for how do we know a unit is ready to deploy? What does readiness mean? And we define in the United States Army, and the Marine Corps is the same way, we defined readiness as we are proficient in our mission essential tasks as a collective unit. We don't go to war as individuals. That's the Air Force. We, Marine Corps and the Army, go to war as units. We fight as units. We win as units. And so there isn't this individual, I'm the best warrior in my team. Okay, great. Well, we need more guns than just you. And we're not going to win this with, super action heroes. Like, we're going to win this as teams. Sure. And so I think that was a good opportunity for me to not only see other units perform and get that perspective, but also coach them towards proficiency performance. There are standards, and I think that's one of the hard things on the civilian side when we're designing training, when we're finding groups that guys to train with. It's difficult to determine standards that everybody's going to be able to meet, or what those standards should be. And for a lot of the guys that don't have the professional experience, this is a rough concept because there's a lot of how do I say this? There's a lot of convincing that has to happen, right? Like, what does success look like here? And so I think one of the very first things that I would lean on is to go, well, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The military has already done this. You can find tasks and standards. And so, if you don't know yet, I just copy. Just copy the military. Like, what are these guys doing? Let's do that. And I think in the beginning that can give organizations some structure. So that's a little bit about my background. And then, after coming back here, noticing a gap in light infantry research. And so this is kind of how we started the Light Fighter Studies group.
Awesome. Now, there was something you said earlier that I'm very curious about because different people have different opinions, specifically those that were actually there throughout GWAT. You had mentioned that the war on terrorism and like the insurgency style of warfare was completely different from what we did during the Cold War. In your opinion, do you think the overwhelming change in training, SOPs, doctrine, support, unit structure, everything that we did to fight the war on terrorism was beneficial for us in the long run or not? Which is a very loaded question to say now as we're looking at a growing Pacific conflict. There's a war in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. It's a loaded question, but looking back,
It's a good one.
was the extent that we went to worth it for the infantry?
Well, I would say that we had to. So
Sure.
in the beginning, and I mean, the very first thing is survive. So it doesn't matter what we want in the long run. If we're dead tomorrow, then we're dead tomorrow. It's not going to matter. And so part of this is a survival thing. If you look at the invasion, and I'm not talking about Afghanistan, if you look at 2003, there's a massive buildup, and it wasn't the same Pyrrhic victory as Desert Storm, but it was close. It wasn't as bloodless as the media made it. If you go back into the history of the invasion and the Thunder Run to Baghdad, the Iraqis put up a fight, probably more so than Desert Storm. And so for the guys that were in that initial invasion, that was airland battle doctrine. They were executing the same doctrine that we took into the desert the first time. And that's why they were able to clear and hold the entire country. We outmaneuvered them. We outfought them. We had better trained warriors, and we leveraged our technology. And we weren't super gods. We took casualties, but we won. We won decisively. The follow-on sectarian violence in the Civil War brought us into we had the concept of military operations other than war, MUTWA. That's what it was called at the time in the Cold War. So we had this concept. We did peacekeeping operations throughout the world. We did low-intensity conflict. This isn't the first time. And that wasn't, I don't think, our problem. I think we turned to the State Department and we said, okay, we took the country. We have a security plan in place. You're the lead for rebuilding. And they turned down the mission. It was their mission. They punted. And they said, nope, that's not our job. It's too dangerous. Bye. And it left the Army with nation building, which is not our primary job. We are the security and administrative function until the civil authorities can step up. And so if you look at the occupation of Germany in World War II, you look at the occupation of Japan in World War II, we were there, of course, pulling security. We were helping vet and rack and stack the hardcore fanatics versus the soldatans that were just following orders, right? Like we didn't execute every Nazi. And by the way, not everybody was like a hardcore Nazi. And so we're like, look, you guys were doing your duty, but your top guys, they're out. Well, we did something similar, except this time we didn't say, hey, all of you guys who are Iraqi Republican Guard, you're good. We recognize you were warriors defending your nation, and you had terrible leaders. And instead we said, no, go home. We don't trust any of you. We'll handle it from there. And so the first move was State Department said, no thanks. The second move was we literally disbanded all of the military structure of Iraq. Instead of keeping that in place, putting our people in charge and shepherding in a new era with the command and control that existed, we just kicked all these guys out. Well, what were they supposed to do? That's all they ever knew. Like, shit, I'm a soldier. All of a sudden you just tell all the soldiers to go home, which, by the way, they're all legally allowed to own firearms, just like we are in the United States, right? Like they actually had firearm, laws that protect their own civil liberties. And so now you've got an armed military population who is not being paid, can't eat because we don't have any money. We're not giving them subsidies. It created a shitstorm. And so it allowed this vector for foreign actors to come in and say, yeah, it's time to exploit the chaos. And they did. And we got sucked into that fight. And so to get at the core of this is, was it good for us in the long run? I probably not, but there wasn't another way to do it. We had to do what we did. And unfortunately, it took so long that the brain drain of fieldcraft in the Cold War, it's gone. We are struggling to get this back now. And you're seeing this in Ukraine. We couldn't proliferate enough knowledge to them in 2015 when I was there training. We couldn't teach them enough about how to not be seen on the battlefield. There are certain implicit things you learn about how to move, where you're going to move to, how to distribute your forces. That we could lecture, but that's not going to be sufficient till you war game. You got to go do force on force. You got to go do war game. You got to play it out, and then have those ARs and go, wow, what happened here? Why did we lose this and not that? And what are we going to do different next time? And it's, the training we gave them was mostly skill level 1 stuff. It was mostly individual rifle marksmanship. It was mostly, how to employ hand grenades, how to clear landmines, how to, I hate to say it, it was a lot of the Cold War critical tasks. And at the time, these guys coming out of Donbass in 2014 were saying, that's kind of not what this fight is. And I remember at the time the NATO leadership going, well, you just need to focus on the basics. And they're trying to communicate to us, no, we're doing raids. We are doing long range infiltration. We're conducting raids against Russian outposts, and then we're running our asses back to friendly lines, And so this is very reminiscent of LRPs in Vietnam, right? And so we're starting to get back into patrolling again. And our army and our leaders, we struggled. We struggled to get back into that mindset because we've got air cover. We can call tanks forward. Everyone now sees how the second invasion played out. Okay, tanks are big targets. Oh, by the way, helicopters can shoot you and they can get shot down. So there's an air battle happening. I mean, we weren't ready for this. And the CTCs, the Combat Training Centers, the United States military, they are great. They do big, large scale war games. But the battlefield has changed in such a way that you can be targeted by existing. And in the past, we at least had rear areas where we could go silent on radios. The enemy didn't have enough thermal devices and other type of sensing equipment to find all of us. And so we could rotate guys in and out of the front line was going to be the theory, right? We're going to continue to move forward and fight. And then, once we reach culmination, we're going to rotate guys in and then they'll take up the next attack or whatever. Where is the rear area? Okay, we're looking at a battlefield now over 3,000 kilometers. I mean, it's nuts. We're talking, thousands of kilometers. We're talking from Denver, Colorado to Lawrence, Kansas. That's the battlefield.
Which is a wild concept because we've reached a point in time where maneuver warfare has almost been become outdated by the types of munitions and weapons we have, while still being in a point in time where maneuver warfare is absolutely critical. It's a very weird time.
It's World War I.
I've heard a lot of people make that comparison. That essentially
not just
it is
the trenches, by the way, but yes, I mean it is.
Sure, yeah.
It's World War I because I think if you look at, and the Russians have a history in their doctrine of this. They think that we're all confused. They believe that as soon as maneuver ends, everything is positional anyway in its mass. And so how they conduct battle is through what they call battlefield calculus. And they have a concept of maneuver. It's not that they're attritionalists. They're actually positionalists, and mostly because they're a heavy artillery-centric army. Basically, what they know is that if you become fixed at any given time, that you become a target. It will just bring up more artillery tubes. We will reduce you out of your positions. You want to dig in? Fine, we'll blow you out. And they're very good at that. And so for us, our imperative is to stay mobile. We have to have agility and space to maneuver in order to keep momentum moving forward. But like you just said, we're the targeting capability of tanks, armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles, helicopters, you name it, and specifically artillery. which is still the number one killer on the battlefield, is field artillery. It necessitates us to dig. We have to get out of the artillery as infantry. The tanks are getting destroyed. The helicopters are getting knocked out. It becomes an infantry fight again with tanks and support. And as soon as that happens, at some point, I have to stop and rest, and I don't have protection. I have to dig. And that digging and not being able to get up and conduct maneuver again, losing that tempo, has forced us back into trenches. And I think part of it is not just the drones. If we're being fair, the drones didn't really start kicking up until we were all dug in. The Ukrainians and Russians both, that phase 3 of the operation, they started digging trenches, and at that point it's like, okay, well, if you're going to sit there, I'm going to send the drone over.
Even before the Russian invasion, I remember back in February of the actual invasion, in the months leading up to it, all these foreign reporters are in eastern Ukraine, and they're talking to Ukrainian military personnel. They're all already in trenches. It's just not as wide scale as it is now, but trenches had already made its way back into Ukraine.
Well, they kind of
before
knew,
the
right?
Russian invasion,
because it's battle positions. So if you're going to be on the defense, like you dig in for survivability.
You got to dig in, yeah.
And by the way, that was especially true in the Battle of Kiev. If you look, not counting the Hostomel airfield air assault by the Russians, the ground forces that were supposed to conduct the link up, they made it, I don't know, I want to say within 20 kilometers of Kiev. They got stopped by guys dug in, but mostly by guys coming up and out of the defense and conducting harassment and ambushes, right? Like, I mean, they were just ambushing Russian columns because the Russians were sticking to the roadways. They weren't clearing wooded areas, right? They were hoping for shock and deep penetration. By the way, they destroyed something like 40% of the Ukrainian Air Force within the first 48 hours of the war. They severed the communications for the headquarters units, brigades and above, especially down south in Kherson. But they conducted cyber attacks. They did EW jamming, and headquarters command and control elements couldn't communicate to the other air wings, and so units were waiting on the tarmac, like, hey, we're waiting for targeting orders, let's go. They got destroyed, and it was the commanders that did what we call a survivability move, right? They literally were like, hey, I've lost comms. My SOP is to get the fuck up out of here and move somewhere else because I don't know if I'm being targeted. And it turns out those guys that did, they literally just go to, highways and set up the runway on the highway. And they set up FARPs and all sorts of other logistic stuff nearby, and they spread out, and they just ran sorties off of the roads. Those guys lived. It was the guys that sat and waited around for orders that died. And so they were good at the shock value. So they thought, oh, these guys they're done. All we have to do is do deep strikes. We're going to go straight to the capital. We're going to seize all their strategic assets, and they're in shock. And they weren't. Guys weren't going to die in place. The guys started moving. They started making local decisions. And I think that's going to be the lesson learned for us as light fighters, as armed citizens, is like, you got to make a decision and move. And probably wherever you're at is not a good place to be. That's my biggest advice I could say, like, thinking of, modern war is like, don't stay in one spot for too long. You're going to get targeted.
So that would be a big question I have, from the command and control perspective, the headquarters perspective, the TOC, the COC, whatever terms and acronyms we're using. What has changed from our perspective based on the Ukrainian-Russian war with how we decide to set up TOCs and COCs in the field? Because I remember back in the Marine Corps, we did field exercises. We'd set up a TOC location for like 2 weeks, and then we'd be like, all right, we're 2 weeks into the FTX. Now we're going to move a little bit. But nothing. The mindset was nothing can really hit our COCs and TOCs, so we don't really got to move.
Right.
How has that changed now with what we've learned?
Yeah, great question. So you're exactly right. And I think we would joke, as a observer, coach, trainer, evaluating units, You always knew where the headquarters was because they made a shit ton of
Mm.
noise with all their generators and trucks and yelling and talking and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And the second thing, you could see the antenna farms and the amount of
Mm.
tents and light support that they would have there. I mean, oh, we've got Porter Johns and we've got, I mean, you just, what the hell? Why did you bring all this shit with you? And you're right. It's
Mm.
because, if we're in green zones or even if we're out in a cop or a fob, depending on where we're at and how big it is, you're right. Okay, indirect. We all build our holes we hide in, our bunkers. And when the indirect drill goes off, we just run the bunker that we get back out, rearrange everything that got destroyed, and we're like back up in operations. We're not physically jumping. The Cold War, that was a thing. You can look back. All the command posts are mobile. They're all on back of trucks. Like, we're not staying anywhere because we'll get targeted. So it has changed. But here's the problem. It's not just mobile anymore. If you're above ground, you're going to get chewed up by artillery. At some point, you're going to key up on that radio. And when you do, you better move. Or conversely, if you can't move and you're like, okay, we're in a defense, we're a company, battalion, brigade, and above, and we're in the defense, what they're doing now is they're digging in. They're building bunkers. And the command posts are moving underground, and they're distributing functions. So not the entire staff isn't in one bunker. So the S2 and fires might be in one bunker, operations and intelligence might be in another bunker, or excuse me, in logistics might be in another bunker. And so they're distributing these bunkers in both location and time. Sometimes they'll just swap out different staff. They'll have redundant staff. The other thing is we can do some tricks. So number one, we don't have to emanate our signal from our location. We can remote our antennas out away from where our actual bunkers are. And if those get destroyed, because as soon as we key up, you can't hide the signal. So instead, we just sacrifice that antenna. We go, yeah, we're going to lose that one. And then we'll have to have replacements. So the logistic burden just increased. That's something we're struggling with. Is just replacing attritional loss. Some of the other things we can do is not push so far forward the entire talk. We have TACs, right? And so the TAC is the tactical command post, and the talk is the tactical operations center. That's where your bigger staffs are going to be. They're further in the rear. That helps. The other aspect is decoys. So what we're seeing now is really, really cheap decoy emitters. And so there's really only two strategies now. It's either turn everything off and be in the dark, or turn everything on all at once and continually saturate the environment with EM. That's it. If you do anything in the middle, you're signaling something to the enemy. So I think that's the other big thing. The third thing is, remember, there's artillery still. So what's happening is everyone is holding their artillery in reserve, and they're waiting for targets to emerge through electromagnetic spectrum targeting. And then it's up to the commander. Is that a real signal, or is that a decoy? What is that? And so if I shoot at it, now I'm creating a signature. Both Russians and the Ukrainians have acoustic radar. Direction finding acoustic radar. And so the second you pop off an artillery tube, it's creating a signature. So those guys have to move. So it's a lot of shoot and scoot. That's what it is. It's shoot and scoot, survivability moves, dig in if you got to be somewhere for a long time, dig in, get your antenna away from you, set up decoy emitters. I mean, everything, it's cat and mouse. That's what this is. And so I think that's how that's changed from both GWAT and Cold War is we're really, really focused on bringing in the tech that we have now. Used to be division and above level assets. We've got radio direction finding equipment, signals analysis equipment. We've got drones. Now I can terminally guide a indirect weapon system accurately as an infantryman. Like, we didn't have that for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, So I think the local speed of the fight is faster. The same problem still exists with logistics and replacement of losses and all of the airland battle, Cold War doctrine. All those things are true. The difference is now we're adding layers of complexity on top. We're not taking anything away. And so I think that's what is throwing a lot of militaries for a loop right now is, what do we invest in? Are we going to divest of these legacy systems that got us here? I mean, by the way, when you're the only guy on the block with a tank and the enemy doesn't have an anti-tank weapon, you have a tank. Guys were laughing. Guys were laughing about literally. They were bringing T-50 series tanks, T-55s out, and somebody was like making jokes on it. And this was early in the war. It was like the Donetsk DNR guys, all the Donetsk People's Republic forces, and they've got tier 4 level equipment, Mosin Nagants, Russian, steel pot helmets from W2 and T-55 series tanks. But, when they were fighting the other militia across the border that literally didn't have any anti-tank weapons, they had the fucking T-55. It's like, shit. So it's really like, it's local advantage. And you could be in a position where the guys across the trench from you don't have shit. Or you could be in a hot spot where everyone's focusing and all assets are brought to bear. And so it really depends on where you're at in space and time. I mean, it's wild, so
it really makes you wonder, what is the ceiling to all of this? Because you can only, we're at this point now where signals intelligence is everything in warfare, and it's really driving a lot of this. Like you said, shoot and scoot just is the name of the game right now. How much higher and how much more carried away does it get before just everything we know just doesn't apply anymore?
Yeah, that's another great question. What we're struggling with in terms of employing the technology, there's a few things. Number one, it's batteries. All of this stuff with electronics is battery hogs. And man, I'm telling you, you get 1 day and a half worth of supply of batteries for a platoon. It's like 80 plus pounds. It's nuts. That's just the extra batteries. That's not including all of the other munitions that we're taking on patrol, all of the machine gun rounds, the mortar rounds, claymores, hand grenades, you name it. It's an additional like almost 100 pounds distributed, right? I mean, not one guy's carrying that, but like, okay,
sure.
When you're already 70 pounds in your rucksack, you add another 10 pounds per dude kind of thing. Like, it starts getting rough really fast. So that's a problem.
I have always been of the opinion, and I have been in this opinion probably about a year into the Russia-Ukraine war, is that if, and really more so when, some sort of a global or large-scale global conflict occurs, whether that's a major power versus major power like U.S. versus China, or it's just the complete breakdown of all civility we currently know, and now there's just 100 mini-wars all over the planet, my personal opinion is that the whole drone thing, electronics thing, batteries, like the full thing is going to come to an end faster than most of us think. I just don't foresee the planet being able to logistically support this style of warfare if the planet as a whole is essentially at war.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. There are bottlenecks, obviously, and production of component parts is a bottleneck. That aspect, they're on the strategic side, they continue to expand that. I don't know what the limit is. I suspect that's a pretty rational approach here to consider that, is like, okay, like how much is this going to continue? My big concern here is semi-autonomous and fully autonomous robotics aspect, because we're about ready. So without being alarmist, the drone swarms are here. They exist.
Sure.
We're not ready. We in the West are not ready to employ them quite yet. And the reason being is we're still struggling with targeting. And so basically the way it works now, there's 3 component parts or 3 different lenses to look at in terms of autonomous operations. One is the human on the loop, in the loop, and through the loop. So humans in the loop is I am fully controlling the robot. I am giving all of its input control. I'm targeting with my eyes. Can be AI assisted to help me with certain functions, but most of the inputs and the feedback that I'm getting is all through me. The second one is the semi-autonomous, which is the human on the loop, which is it is running pre-programmed, we'll call them battle drills, right? I think that's actually the best way to look at it. They're running football drills, do this search pattern, fly this pattern, do this behavior. And so it's already, the parameters are already set. It's going to run the route. And during that route, it's going to target and it's going to suggest targets to you. Now, the theory is right now, all of the strike commands are human initiated, meaning the robot will say, hey, I think this looks like you're a bad guy. You know, do you want me to strike? Yes, no kind of thing. And then you say, no, disregard, or yes, that's the thing I need you to kill. And then it will execute the kill, or it will hold off. The problem that we're going to run into is that we need it quicker. Always. We're always going to want it quicker. That kill chain needs to be as fast as possible, especially when we start stacking multiples of these things in the same area, right? And so in the future, what the theory is that the swarms are going to be able to move out and do different tactics, but that they will be able to start initiating strikes on their own so that the humans can continue to patrol, push forward, fight, whatever on the ground. And that's the fully autonomous human through the loop, which is I'm just fully pre-programmed this thing and let it go. I'm saying everything in this, you know, I'm drawing a zone and I'm saying everything in this zone during this time gets killed. And so what is envisioned in the future is that our big formations are moving, and as they're moving across the battlefield, if you can think about, you know, to fast cams, think about air deliverable artillery that is, you know, time initiated. We will put those on our flanks to help screen our forces. That's what these swarms are going to be used for. They will screen forward of our main bodies. They'll screen to the left and to the right of our flanks. And they may even be pulling rear area security for us if we need it to, so we can do other functions. So that's the theory moving forward. The problem is it's the control aspect. We don't, you know, can we identify the enemy? Yeah, until they change their disposition. So we're working on friendly force identification requirements right now and all sorts of stuff to help us make sense of this, but we're not there yet. We're still in the what routes do we need them to run, and how does the machine team with us while we're doing our tasks, our tactical tasks. And that's become what, you know, the software engineer guys are starting to realize, you know, fighting's a lot more complicated than just deductive and inductive logic. That's not what's all going on. And so while I would say that we're close, I'm not quite sure it's going to be what the military thinks it's going to be. Because soon as we start adding that complexity, I'm not even sure we know even what we're doing fully, to be honest, when we're fighting. I think we know, and then when we turn around and try to program that, it starts falling apart. So I think there's still a place for the human for a while, for a long while. And I think this tech is you're going to have to be a jack of all trades. You're going to have to be able to do both analog and digital. And we already saw that in the Cold War and even GWAT, right? Think about your land navigation. You got to know compass and your protractor and your map and your pace counts. But you also need, why wouldn't you bring the GPS too, right? I'm not going to not do both. I'm going to bring both. And I'm going to know the principles, know how to check the GPS for accuracy, use the GPS, but always go back to the foundation. Like, wait a minute, if, you know, the GPS says I'm over here, but I'm clearly not standing on a hill. Well, don't trust the GPS. Verify with your analog, right? So you're going to have to do both. You're going to have to stack skills, and it's the same with this drone stuff. It's the same with all the radio tech, the signal direction finding. Like, you're going to have to do more because the enemy's figuring out how to do the basics plus. So you can't just be shooting and, you know, in medical anymore. You're gonna have to know, at least in your team, what the effects of radio direction finding, electromagnetic warfare, what these drones can and can't do. I mean, they're not super weapons, but the team that knows how to leverage them, they're getting advantages. So,
yeah, and I think that's a big thing as far as the push for the American Rifleman, the education, and, you know, the whole thing behind that is that, you know, you're not going to be able to focus and be just a rifleman or be just, you know, a mindset infantryman or whatever it is that the American Rifleman has to be a much more complex individual, one that has, you know, has tipped their toes in a little bit of everybody's water and has secondary skill sets. You know, just being able to work the gun is is not applicable for kind of what we think of as the community defense force conversation.
Yeah, and so there's some good news, and I would say that you don't have to do it all. You should have friends. When it was
Yeah,
back to the
not
first
everybody
we
can.
talked
Yeah, you
about,
can't do everything.
right? We can't do it all, and so we do have to understand where our limitations are. And so I think it does make sense, if you got a community guys, that there's naturally going to be a few guys that are interested in certain things. Hopefully, you got a guy that's interested in communications. Hopefully, you got a guy that's interested in medical. Hopefully, you got a few guys that are really good at land nav and moving around in the world for real. You got a few guys that are good at marksmanship, like whatever that is. If you get enough group of guys together, they're going to have a variety of natural talents and skills and like leverage that. I mean, it kind of seems like that's an obvious statement, but I think if guys are panicking about, oh my God, there's so much I have to know, then to me, that's probably an indicator that like, maybe your squad's not big enough. Maybe your platoon's not big enough. Like whatever that is, you need to open your aperture up and try to find other guys that have some core skills. The other aspect too is training. I know your group of guys are really good at this. You guys are constantly going out and seeking other training opportunities to get that variety to bring back to your teams. And that's important, not just at least of which of, making community and sharing knowledge, but also to see like, what are we missing? What aren't we focusing on? What could we be focusing on that gives us an advantage? And so I think that's important. So what you guys,
well, the big thing,
I like what you guys are doing.
and the big thing, for me as a leader and as an instructor was I find it important to try to find opportunities to also be a student. There's the cliche, cheesy thing of you're always a student, always a learner, so on and so forth, and that's very true. But at the same time, I also learn more about becoming a better instructor and leader by being a student under instructors and leaders, not necessarily for the skill sets it is itself. If I take a rifle class, am I going to get a lot out of a rifle 1 class? Absolutely not. I'll be very honest. It's arrogant to say out loud, but I'm not going to get anything out of a rifle 1 curriculum. But what I will get to develop myself as an instructor is, hey, does this other individual present this information better than I do it? Or does he do something that's better than what I do? And then that develops me even further.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I tell guys all the time, especially for the military guys, because they do get into somewhat of a mindset that they don't have to go to any outside training. And I'm speaking very broadly here. They think, I did it all, when they probably really didn't do it all. But they're like, I did it all, so I don't have to go do it. Right. And that's probably true in a very few circumstances. But generally speaking, that is not true for everyone.
I would agree. Most of what, and we talked earlier about, some of the success and Desert Storm and the Army of Excellence and Airland Battle Doctrine. I think if you go back and you read anything from that time period, what all the leaders said, and even the junior soldiers, everybody just said, man, the standards, we just trained. We trained all the time, day and night, constantly training. And to the point where, it was so redundant and repetitive, but like it was second nature, right? Because when everything's falling apart, what are you going to do? You're going to fall back on muscle movement, right? Everything's happening too fast. The way we make decisions is rapid decision making. We're looking for first fit pattern match, not best fit. And so what's going to give you an advantage is your psychomotor movement and that muscle memory. The second thing that's going to give you an advantage is how many times you've seen that phenomenon before. So whatever you're patrolling, you're assaulting a trench, it doesn't matter. Whatever that battlefield phenomenon is, the question is how many times were you pre-exposed to this in training? And how good was that training in terms of fidelity to match that reality, right? And we've been struggling with this since World War II. I mean, you saw early indoctrination where guys were shooting real bullets over, GIs crawling under barbed wire, and they're like, this is our inoculation training. And it's like, we've been trying to replicate audio, sensory, other sensory smells, physical movements. We're trying to replicate the battlefield. Of course, nothing will ever do it. There is no
Mm-hmm.
simulation system. There is no training design that's a 1-for-1 fidelity match. No one is confused
Mm-hmm.
about that, or at least anybody who's a professional trainer. We get it. But what we need to try to do is weave in as much of that as possible in an authentic way that it's going to cue
Mm-hmm.
your brain body memory, right? Because your body's got a bunch of memory in it too. And so that's what we're trying to do is activate that brain body memory so that when you're in it, it happens and you don't have to consciously think about it, because you won't consciously think. You just act.
Yeah.
And so
I 100% agree.
So I think that's that. But the second part is so here's the downside. So you can have great training, but there's a deficiency that happens over time. Your skills will atrophy. Psychomotor skills atrophy. It's what happens. And so one of the things that I would encourage any of the listeners to consider is to sketch out. All right, here's my core tasks. Here's my individual tasks. What do we need? What do I need to train on? And then look at the collective. But on those individual training tasks, there needs to be a frequency annually. Some things don't need to be trained every year. Some things do need to be trained every year. And some things can be trained out multiple, every so many years you might get to that, right? But whatever that is, you can tell, like medical tasks, anything with fine motor movement. If I've got to put tourniquets on, if I've got to, put pressure bandages on, I want to practice that every year. If it's a critical task, every year I need to go to a Stop the Bleed course, right? There's not a lot of CLS stuff, Combat Lifesaver on the civilian side, but what a lot of local cities have is Stop the Bleed. It's kind of like a nationally recognized program. At least get a Stop the Bleed class, right? Something to get, let me put the tourniquet on. I've done this 1,000 times, but our skills atrophy. Same thing with rifle marksmanship. I got it. You don't have to go take a full course. Go qualify, like, does your group do a qualification? Everyone should be able to pass. That's not the point. The point is going and exercising that task, because it builds, it keeps that proficiency up. So I think that's the other, and that from being in the Marine Corps, you guys did skill level 1 training all the time. Oh man, I already know how to, I already know how to shoot. Oh man, I already know how to, that's not the point. The point is just go do it. Because we keep our reps and sets up. So I think that's the big thing. And building out some type of training program. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be like, oh man, I got to find a professional instructor. As long as those guys have had some experience with those tasks, like pull the tasks out. You can find them online. I mean, you can just go online and pull skill level 1 tasks up. Grab those tasks. They've got standards in them. It tells you what to look for. Did these guys do that? If they did, go. If they didn't, hey man, you're a no-go. And then diagnose. Hey, what happened? Oh man, I think this. Okay, let's recock and try it again. And you might find that there's a few guys that have like a special technique for doing X, and then that comes out. And then, because some guys know, but they're not natural teachers. They're not natural, guys that want to stand up in front of everybody and go, hey guys, this is how it works, and blah, blah. That's fine. Sometimes kind of round robin works, and those guys will kind of come forward. Hey, hang on, man. Let me show you how to do this, and like, oh shit, how come you never told me? Oh, I didn't know you needed this, that kind of thing. So I think having a routine with skill level 1 training in your group, that's important. And then for the collective stuff, like what you guys do is you're like, all right, hey, this other organization's putting on an FTX. We're going to bring a squad in and we're going to go to attend their FTX. Why? Because when we start getting into collective, fire team, squad, platoon, you need external trainers at that point. You need a third party to organize the box that you're going to train in, organize an OP4, organize the missions, be the hire as an act of feedback, right? Because we're prompting, we're changing certain vignettes, and then you get to focus on command and control and performing as a team. And so I think that's the second level, is locally focus on your skill level 1. But if you're going to train collective, go out, get with another team and do the collective with them.
Have you been talking to my guys? We've talked about this for years. The biggest thing that we struggle with at the local level, we're talking about the community defense kind of side of the house. Yeah. Is that whoever kind of the top guy is in the local organization, they struggle with being able to perform during an FTX as an individual and not as a instructor and or evaluator. And that's been the biggest struggle with me for years now, is I organize these big FTXs, 30, 40, 50 people, thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I'm doing all of the evaluating, all of the instructing. I might have a person or two to help me, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm not getting to train on the command side from myself. And for those of you that are in the same shoes that are listening, it's very hard to do because the conversation basically goes, what's more important, developing myself as a commander or developing 30 other people underneath of me? My opinion has always been developing 30 individuals is more important than developing myself.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I mean, because again, it comes back to skill level 1 stuff. And if we raise our collective skill level 1 proficiencies, we're hedging our bet. It's an odds thing, right? Like whatever platoon we're going to go up against, whatever company we're going to go up against, if there's more of us that have better skill level 1 skills, like we're going to probably come out on top. It's just this reality. And so I think that's a good logic. I think that's why there are organizations like One Shepard that they already have that training package built. And so the cool thing is it's like you can come as a fire team, you can come as a squad. You can go through the pipeline together, and in that way you're refocusing from, oh, I need to learn these skills as an individual, to no, actually we're here for the team, we're here for the collective. So I think that's maybe another way to look at some of these programs. And again, they're not the only ones. There's some others out there. But
there's really not. Outside One Shepard, SNS, and Tusk, those are the only long-term FTX events that I am aware of. At least on the larger, more well-organized scale. SUSK is kind of starting to come up, which is a little bit more medical-oriented. But if you're looking to go somewhere to do a 72-hour FTX with or without, a training curriculum beforehand, your options are slim.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you just said it, like how much resource intensive it is, how much time intensive it is, and if we're civilians, we're not getting paid to do this the way we were in the military, and so it's like, okay, there's an opportunity cost. I got to take work off. I got to be away from the family. I got to do all this other stuff, and so that could be difficult, obviously. There are some, and again, you're right. I mean, if I'm being honest, I'm biased. I mean, I grew up in One Shepard. I was one of their first cohorts of instructors, and I helped build that program out. Very proud of it, and I do think it's the best expeditionary leadership school in the United States, hands down. You're gonna get a seat at leadership, and if you go to colleges, you might go through an MBA and they talk about leadership and leadership this and that, and it's really pedantic. It's like setting up vision statements and giving speeches in front of crowds, and it's like, okay, yeah. Building and cultivating vision, showing future state, desires. Yes, that's part of leadership, but oh my gosh, like that's nothing like leading a patrol, and then getting in a firefight and then coming back and doing an AR and going like, what the hell just happened? I mean, that's a whole different level of leadership, and they are. They're the only leadership school that's doing what they're doing. I will say that you can take sections, like you just said. SNS is another one, really focused on skill level 1, and then you're going to get thrown into collective. And their focus is they scaffold. So their cadre are going to lead a lot of those patrols, and the focus is on skill level 1 as a warrior, right? So you're going to go through the FTX with them and do the force on force, but they're not expecting you to be at a run phase. They're looking at you as like a crawl and a walk, right? Whereas like One Shepard because it's a 3-year program in One Shepard, they're going to build you up into that run phase, and you're on your own. I mean, by the end of it, you don't need any assistance from the instructors. There are other organizations out there that are doing like live fires and stuff like that too. But again, you're right. It's portions of it. You're going to get snippets, maybe 24 hours at the most. And then there's some other military simulations that exist. Most of those guys are using airsoft, and I know that's like it's a turnoff for a lot of guys, especially once you do the blank in miles. You're like, yeah, I'm not, with blanks and miles, I'm getting 300, 400 meter engagements, realistic engagement ranges. Airsoft is like 50, 100 kind of thing. And so, but again, we talked about that. They're actually even the miles has problems. There is no one-to-one solution for a real bullet. So let's just say that out loud. Like they all have limitations, right? Because it's not a real bullet. Thank God. So if you can bear the airsoft thing, there are other long range simulations out there that are multi-days. And really what that does, you saw it at Winter Forge. You got to be in the field for a handful of days. to reach a certain point of sustainment and operational tempo. And what we mean by that is if you're only doing a 24-hour FDX, nobody has to sleep. You can get away with barely having water, and you can really get away with not really even eating. And guys can run, balls to the wall and then crash at the end of that thing. But if you're going like 3 days, 4 days, leaders have to start pacing the operation. And it doesn't mean it's not high intensity. But what it means is like you can't just put the pedal to the floor the whole time, or your guys are gonna crash. And so I think that's what I encourage guys to look for is like get a 3 or 4 day FTX, because that's gonna change your leader's perspective.
And that was a big thing for me. Like, after the Winter Forge FTX I was just so go for 2.5 days. Like I was just volunteering for everything. I was taking guys out all the time, filling gaps. Once we started having the damn shits and guys had injuries, like we had to start filling a lot of gaps. And by the end of that, once we left that Friday afternoon, once we had done cleanup everywhere, my crew stopped at a B-Dubs like 2 hours east of you guys, heading back home, trying to get dinner. And I got out of the car and I gimped my ass into that restaurant because my feet were torn up. I got home, I had a damn rash in my groin because I didn't do proper hygiene in the field because I was just so go. That's a very true statement. You can tough anything for 24 hours. Anything. You start getting past 48 hours, life catches up with you really, really fast. And if you're not fit and if you're not mentally prepared to deal with that, it'll eat you even faster.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I think since the beginning of time, like what are the things we can do to prepare? Be physically fit, number one. The second thing is train on your skill level 1 task. And third thing is have friends. I mean, those are my 3 big things. Like, all right, I'm going to hedge my bets. How do I do this? I need to, be mentally tough and physically tough. And I need to be somewhat proficient in my skills. And then I need to have friends that are doing the same thing. And that's what else is there to do? I mean, you can keep stacking skills and keep training and trying, but like at some point in time, it just comes down to how many friends do you have that are able to keep fighting? And so seeking opportunities to test that is good. Man, especially, a lot of us guys have been out for a while. And so every once in a while it's good to just get back in the saddle. And it's rougher as we get older. It also 100%. Gets rougher too. You're like, man, okay, I'm feeling it. I used to just sleep on the ground, no sleep pad or anything, I'm getting older. So I'm like, oh no, I kind of need the sleep pad. So it changes some things, but but for the point is, I think getting in the field, I think that's a big thing. And that's what your group does really well. You guys are constantly you're either training locally and then you're immediately going out and you're seeking other opportunities. And then, you do your local train cycle again. And I think what you guys are doing now, here's what I would ask. Whatever you guys, whatever your cycle is, have you guys ever written anything down about your local home station training?
When we get done with this podcast, I was already thinking about this about 10 minutes ago. We're going to open up screen sharing and I will show you what our training calendar looks like because you're going to get all hot and bothered.
Yeah. Cause I think, and I'm not saying, again, the OPSEC thing, I'm not saying you have to share, but man, so many organizations have asked, how do I build a training strategy? And no one's really shared that with the civilian world yet. Not because it's super secret. It's just difficult to. Most organizations just aren't that professionalized, and so I think.
So I have. Sorry. So I have one YouTube video up that kind of talks about how to create training for the Minutemen. But you're right. There probably isn't enough of an in-depth how-to or guide. And I've talked about it on one other podcast. And I'm more than happy to revisit it. Essentially, the way my local crew looks at training is we look at it from an annual perspective. We do not look at it on a training by training basis and go, all right, what have we not done in a little while? Or what do we want to happen to hit this Saturday? Like, we're looking at training. Like, I am already working on 2026's training calendar.
Roger. Yeah. Okay.
So it's that far ahead.
Yeah.
Now we break things down into long range. All training events outside FTXs, because they're culminating style events, are broken down into 3 categories. We have sprint topics, small unit topics, review topics. Sprint topics are everything that is not tactical in nature. And we have 6 sprint topics because they're in 2-month increments for the year. We have cold weather operations, which is December and January.
Mhm.
You know, we live here in the Cincinnati tri-state. Everybody knows I'm from the Cincinnati tri-state. So we have, you know, kind of that wet cold that we talked about at Winter Forge. We have that, you know, 35 down to like,
Yeah.
you know, 10, 15. Like that's
The
what we
rough
have.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So that starts the year. It starts/ends the year, January, December. We have cold weather operations. And it talks about more than just the operations. It is the cold weather medical side. It's the cold weather preparedness side. It's the cold weather survival side. So everything cold weather wrapped into a training block. February, March, as our sprint topic, we hit homesteading and preparedness. It's right before garden season starts. It's right before guys get new livestock. We do an entire training curriculum around the preparedness side to develop our guys as individuals.
Gotcha. Yeah.
April, May is medical. We have our annual first aid CPR AED certification day, followed by a ton of different stuff, whether it's medevac, CASEVAC, you know, assisting the medic, you know, all of that kind of stuff. You get into the summertime, people are starting to travel a little bit for family vacations. You see attendance drop a little bit, but that is our fitness and combatives stuff. We have our annual PFT. We do combatives. We do detainment training. You get into the fall timeframe, August, September. We're wrapping up hurricane season. That's our disaster response. We're doing search and rescue. We're doing response, disaster response planning.
Yeah.
We're doing, we're revisiting land nav.
Yeah.
We're doing that kind of stuff.
And you guys, and so, you know, starting, and you already doing this naturally. You're clustering by function, you know, so like in the infantry, it's like shoot, move, communicate, survive, you know, those types of things. And then like medical would be under survive. And so we do that, but you're starting with your mission. And so I think that's the biggest thing is like, all right, what's the scope of your mission? You have a group, you're a unit, what's your mission? And if you can't define that, it's going to be really difficult for you to develop that down trace in what are my collective tasks and then what are my individual tasks, right? And so it sounds like you guys already have that mission. You're like, yep, here's our scope. We're civil defense. We can come and augment and help our local community survive turmoil and disasters while being prepared to also, you know, do security functions and that type of stuff. And I think the mission's going to drive that training calendar. It should, right? So maybe that would be the big thing is, you know, these guys seeing examples of training calendars, have seen examples of how to do that crosswalk between how, okay, I've got all these individual tasks, but what am I doing as teams? Because that's what we do in the military is like, we have these crosswalks based off of unit and missions. And so I think that's I don't know that when I talk to guys, I think that's the biggest thing they struggle with is like, well, we do this, we do that, we do this, we do that. And it's like, okay, you've done it though. You've clustered and went here. These are our functions. And so it's a topic.
I think a big,
you know,
I think something people struggle with too from the training side of the house and the more administrative side is that people are hesitant and or afraid to organize a little bit more in an official capacity. You will never get the type of training calendar, you know, just kind of rattling off.
Yeah.
In a group message of 10 guys who live 3 hours or so apart from each other, who meet maybe kind of sort of occasionally on this day every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that is the nature of the beast. You're going to get as much training out of that as you are from the level of organization and administrative steps that you are willing to take. The more organizational steps that you do take, the more you get out of the training capacity from an organization, because then you can standardize stuff. You can develop internal SOPs. You know that there's regular places that you train at. You know that there's standards to test to, your PFTs, your rifle quals, all this kind of other stuff.
Yeah.
Then you move towards culminating events at FTXs, and you have training topics that you're trying to hit. So it's you're only going to get as much out of it as you're willing to organize.
Right. And and you're deliberately, and I think that structure helps build rhythm. And battle rhythm helps us build culture, and it helps us with cohesion, right? And so the more obviously cohesion comes from familiarity and trust, but that battle rhythm provides that structure. Because I think you're right, and I think it's that discipline to say, hey guys, and for guys who are starting out, the biggest thing is it doesn't matter how many guys you get to show up to whatever event, just do it. If you say you're going to do it, do it. Put it on the calendar, do the thing, show up, take your pictures, tell your guys. If you build consistency, people will start rallying around structure. If you don't build consistency and you flake because you didn't get your vision, they're going to abandon it. They are. Guys are going to go where the structure's at. But, and I think that's on the leaders too. The leaders like, it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to put the yeoman's work in, and the other guys they're going to kind of ride around, and that's okay. But somebody's got to do it, I guess, So, and that was kind of like us and Light Fighter, and also with One Shepherd and SNS. It's just like a handful of guys just stand up and go, hey, we'll take this piece of it. And that's kind of how our Light Fighter community has been built over the years here in the Midwest.
And for all things in life, but this kind of stuff specifically, in the beginning, it may be just you doing all of the work. I know that was very true for me.
Yeah,
I did all of the work for, I would argue, probably 2.5 years for the most part. And there was no problem with that. The group was small. It was well contained. I'm talking a good sized squad of guys. That's easy to manage and create curriculum for. But as you grow, you got to start handing out tasks. You got to start developing other leaders, which you started to be doing from the beginning. But you've got to be comfortable doing it all on your own, making mistakes within reason, and figuring it out, and then progressing outwards and growing as your organization grows. You can't start off with 6 local guys and be like, all right, guys, here's these battalion battle drills we're gonna do. Like, that's not how it works.
Right? Yeah. No.
You got to think realistic. You got to think smaller.
That's a great point.
Man, wow, we've talked about a lot so far.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I will have to get ready to go here. I've got to put the kids down to bed, so I figured this would be a good pause to for you to edit later. But no, I appreciate you having me on, man. I really do.
Absolutely.
I think what you guys are doing is great. I think you guys are adding a level of discipline and professionalism that's needed. And the fact that you guys not only have, like we were just talking about, long range calendars, you guys have training plans, a unit training plan, and then you go seek external feedback and experiences. That's kind of like the holy grail of it all in my mind. So I think you guys are doing great.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Are you going to be able to come back after you put the kids to bed? Or do we need a temporary pause? Or do we need to wrap up?
No, we're probably going to need to wrap up here for tonight at least.
That's
I'm
fine.
Actually leaving on a trip tomorrow morning. So otherwise I would stay up later and chit chat. But, again, if you ever, want to have me on again, I'll definitely make time for it.
We can definitely do a part 2. This was been a very good episode so far, I think.
Great, man.
What I guess to kind of wrap things up here, what advice would you have for everybody that's listening, kind of that American Rifleman that's been listening to this episode and been like, wait a minute, they never really talked about the American Rifleman throughout this episode.
Right.
What would you what advice would you give to them as we kind of head into these even weirder times that we're in?
That's a great question. So, number one, I would focus on first yourself, physical fitness, individual skill proficiencies. And we can break that up into 2 categories. One is rifle marksmanship. That's your individual weapons proficiency. The second is individual task proficiencies. So, how to put a tourniquet on, how to stop the bleed, how to communicate on a radio. The list goes on. How to land navigate, right? Those type of individual skill level 1 tasks. Shoot, move, communicate. And then after that, you need to find friends that you can do collective tasks with. That's you survive in units. You don't survive on the battlefield by yourself. So you need to find a group of guys, like-minded guys, that are willing to form into a unit to train collective tasks. You don't have to know everything right off the bat. There are ways to pull collective tasks off the internet. All of our battle drills that exist in the infantry, those are good places to start. Rudimentary small unit tactics and patrolling. And if you don't have a subject matter expert, go to a school. Go to somewhere that's teaching small unit tactics and patrolling and learn from somebody else. Bring your team with you, your fire team, your squad, whatever, or just your battle buddy. You got one other guy, but go as a team, learn how to be in a collective unit and patrol tactically, and then expand from there. And seeking that external training is good, especially as you're forming your teams. And then after that, building your own unit's training plan for annual training. You have to keep your skill proficiencies up. That requires a plan, a deliberate plan that's not ad hoc, and then put it on the calendar, put what tasks you're training on there, and then take turns evaluating. That's what I would say.
We're waiting for you.
Awesome.
You were doing that.
Well, Tyler, I don't know who's. I'm guessing the kids are getting yelled at in the background.
Yeah.
don't upset mom. Well, Tyler, I appreciate you coming on, man. I know everybody that's gone to One Shepherd as well as SNS, a lot of people talk very highly about you. So I'm just glad I was able to get you on the podcast and let you, hit the road running with a lot of what we talked about.
I appreciate you having me on, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right, guys, that is all I have for episode 42, Evolution of Warfare. As always, train hard, train often.
Tell me turn it down and I'ma only turn up louder. Call me what you wanna, but you can't call me no coward. Strength in numbers, we the people, still the ones with power. Fighting fire with fire, time to take back what is ours. Tell me turn it down and I'ma